with George Kehayas, who had a long and distinguished career at Toyota Motor Manufacturing Canada, and now he has his own consulting firm, Yokoten Operations Management. George is an expert in strategic development, which would be our topic of conversation today. So George, good to have you here. Please, let's start with an introduction about yourself and tell me about your experience. It's been a long number of years, so tell me about that.
Thank you very much, AJ. Thank you for the invitation, and it's a pleasure being here today with you and everyone else. Yes, I have. I've had 31 years, over 30 years at Toyota Motor Manufacturing in Canada. Within that time frame, I've worked with many suppliers. I worked with the head office in Japan. Because again, when we first started off the facility here in Ontario, it was a greenfield facility and there was no production, and it was actually started up as a bit of an experiment. So to see how successful Toyota could actually be in Canada. Well, we had proven in a very short period of time that the success that was built, again, with a lot of strength from the team members, was one of the key elements that just kept on growing and growing and growing year after year. And that little company that was supposed to only produce maybe 50,000 vehicles way back in 1988, 89, ended up producing over 600,000 vehicles a year, and it just continues to actually produce that amount. Now, my capacity within Toyota was within project management, production control, new product development, and in every case, strategic management was required. So the same way that Toyota started, TMMC as being an experiment, without strategic development and a strategic mindset, that would not have been successful after all these years. Within every role that I have played at Toyota, strategic management and the mindset is critical when coming up with your daily operations, when you're coming up with your objectives, and when you're even communicating with your team members.
That's very insightful and very interesting. So from a large enterprise perspective, if you're looking at some organization like TMMC, a lot of strategic development went into its success over the number of years. And I believe that's what your organization, your own organization, Yokoten, that's what it focuses on. It focuses on improving the company culture and facilitating organizational change. And you do talk about Yokoten's best practice and core principles. So can you just explain what Yokoten is doing and what are those best principles?
Certainly. So the client base that that we're working with, we're implementing a systemic methodology to ensure that there is a link between the strategy. First of all, to ensure that there is a strategy for the company, and then that strategy links to every aspect of the company. So right from the president level to the executives, to each specific operation, whether it be in Canada, whether it be in the States, whether it be in Mexico, and then to ensure that each plant and then each plant department also has the same mindset with the initial strategy or objectives that are set up by the company executive. So a lot of what my experiences in the past is that there's a disconnect from operation to operation, department to department, and then that leads down to the employee as well. There seems to be a lot of confusion that the employee doesn't necessarily understand what management is doing, or what senior management is doing, or what company objectives are. So it's important to streamline for efficiency requirements for the bottom line, because if there is an alignment right from the top down and bottom up. That's basically with Yokoten Operations Management. This is what we are working on with our client base.
And I've definitely seen companies which excel in that space and which have proven practices and the culture is there. But there are a lot of companies which do not have that culture, who do not have a strategic goal, who do not have a strategic plan, or if they have it, they don't follow it. So definitely that is a core area where a lot of improvement is required. But before we go on, let's just define the term strategy and then the term strategic development for our listeners so that they understand the overall topic of this IICA insight.
The strategy, basically is to outline what is the requirement, for the company. It's what are the objectives, for the company, and to ensure that there is alignment at the top level of those objectives. And you need to get buy-in from the entire organization at the executive level. And this is one of the biggest challenges, I believe, that a lot of companies have to deal with because there are a lot of conflicting objectives. And we talk about the dog with the loudest bark, for example, that gets the most attention. In a corporate environment, sometimes it's those objectives that seem to take precedent over others. So this is to have that strategy agreed to, identified, and signed off by all of the key executive that are required. That is the first key step. After you have that, it brings a sense of focus to the organization that now we have the understanding and the alignment to move forward with that specific strategy that we're trying to achieve company base.
So what I see over here is based on your definition, there are companies who make major strategic decisions without going through a strategic planning process. And the one which comes to my mind is when Target moved to Canada.
Yes.
Uh, they came in, they had 50 stores or something like that. They opened them up. They put in buyer processes. They had everything. But at the end of the day, it was a huge disaster. So do you
Yes.
see that as an example of where strategic planning was not followed?
Yes, that's an excellent example, AJ. And part of the reason for that is that sure you can start from an overall head office strategic mindset, but if you don't look at the regionality of where you are doing business, you are bound to fail. And Target tried to take a template that worked very, very well in the States. However, they did not review a lot of the key items that were going to make it difficult for them to run their operations in Canada. So that's why in a very short period of time, by not evaluating the true requirements, the regional requirements, they ended up failing. And it was a very costly mistake. But the good thing with strategy is that you have to be able to react to it and make changes where required and communicate those changes accordingly. So now with Target, they've been able to, yes, they pulled out of the Canadian market. However, in the States and through what we're experiencing right now in the COVID environment, they've been able to refocus and move forward with what they're going to be doing. Another good example, with this, with strategic development and being able to change and continuously improve is Starbucks. Starbucks, as we know, is a coffee shop, let's call it, that a lot of people, would go into the Starbucks stores, into the Starbucks cafes, and spend a lot of time at the Starbucks. Now, in light of what's going on in the environment again, they are going to be closing a lot of those stores and creating more efficient, takeout, more immediate, sort of, shops that it begs to the environment of where we are. So that was a strategic development, a strategic, high-level decision that Starbucks was forced into doing.
That is a very interesting example because as a person who's been focused around entrepreneurship, startup has always been the place where you will go and have your meetings. So it wasn't about the coffee, it was about having those meetings. And I think there's a book out there which says how to become a billionaire having meetings at Starbucks. There are examples of organizations which are forced to take strategic decisions based on the environment and based on the success or lack of success of certain strategic decisions. And that has to be part of the strategic planning process, as you just mentioned.
Yes.
So then, if we look at the benefits of strategic planning, if we talk about the 4, 5 main benefits, I guess one of those benefits is how to look at what is not working. But what would be the other benefits?
At the end of the day, every business is in business to be profitable. So efficiency, proper alignment, it's all going to be leading into that. So it could be efficiency from a process perspective. It could be efficiency from a manpower perspective. It could be, for example, right now, a lot of, here's another example of strategic change is the work from home movement. A lot of companies had to reevaluate why do they need the big brick and mortar stores or offices that they do have when people can actually work from home and working from home very effectively. So a lot of companies right now have also indicated that, yeah, they're going to be shutting down, the office space and allocating, the proper, cybersecurity and proper equipment for their employees to work from home. Hence, at the end of the day, it is a major cost savings, to them as well. So, yeah, strategic development, as I mentioned before, it's a definite, it's an ongoing, process. You have to look at your short term, your midterm, your long term plans, and then you have to adjust accordingly as required and as the environment requires you to.
Okay, so let's talk about that process. So this has to be a formal process rather than just having taken decisions based on the current environment. I know COVID-19 is a specific case, but there would be other instances where there would be external stimuli into the process. So can you just tell us about the overall process? What is the strategic development methodology? What factors come into play, and how should that be carried out by an organization?
Well, depending on the maturity of the organization, it is going to be different for a startup versus a mature, company that has been doing business for many, many years. So there's always, and I mentioned the long-term planning, and long-term planning could be 10 years moving forward. There's also the planning, the 5-year plans. There's the annual plans, and then there's also monthly plans that need to take place. If we are looking at a startup is very difficult again to kick off because you don't know the end result. You don't know what your sales. You can come up with your sales objectives, but unless you have your product out there or your service out there, you have to be able to have that mindset that says, okay, I am going to create my 5-year plan, and then I am going to create my 1-year plan, and then on a monthly basis, I am going to be looking at what are my key performance indicators, what are my objectives, and then how I am progressing to those monthly objectives which again lead to the annual objectives, which will lead to the 5-year plan.
And you mentioned startups. There is a concept in startups, early stage companies, that they don't need a strategic planning sections, plan, methodology. Who should be involved for strategic planning in a startup? Because definitely there are not different layers of management there. So how do you see that working out?
There are a lot of successful, startups. There's a lot of 10-year overnight successes, let's call them, that, they started up and it took them a while to get to, where they are now. Ultimately, yes, it does fall on the shoulders of the executive. It does fall on the shoulders of the senior management. And one of the biggest challenges with startups is that you do have a lot of talented people, a lot of talented engineers, a lot of talented grads that are out there with fantastic ideas. However, bringing that corralling all those ideas and bringing all that to fruition makes it very, very difficult. So again, it's difficult for a startup if there's not alignment in the thinking of with the strategic business plan that they have for them to be able to finance or to get funding that's required for their operations.
And as you just said, sometimes circumstances make the startup. So Zoom is a good example. We're using Zoom right now. The
Yes.
COVID-19 pandemic totally changed the business parameters of Zoom.
Yes. See, and even with Zoom, I know that initially, I think we've all been exposed to it. There was a lot of problems, with security, with Zoom. There was a lot of problems with connectivity, for example. But they had to regroup and take the strategic mindset that they had and fix those problems. And now they're stronger, than ever with that.
Can you give some examples of maybe a startup, but maybe a mid-sized business, which because of great strategic planning has become a household name or a great success in its own industry sector?
I don't want to use the name specifically, but I did mention like a 15-year overnight success, but it is in the cybersecurity field that they were maybe ahead of their time, but they just kept on progressing as required, as they saw the industries were requiring, as they saw the environment, requiring the product, and kept on improving, the product line, and kept on expanding, and kept true to the faith of this is going to come to the requirement out there. So they kept on building and improving upon their product to the point where now they're an industry leader, and the improvement is just it's continuous.
And that's the essence of strategic planning, that it has to be a continuous process. It has to be
Exactly.
always maybe on a, you mentioned monthly basis, but there has to be annual reviews of what you are doing, quarterly reviews. What would be the inputs into the strategic planning process? And would it include all the departments of the organization?
The most successful strategic planning, yes, it is when you have the engineering group, the production group, manufacturing, purchasing, IT. It's very, very important to have buy-in with all the department heads, because if you don't, it will not be successful. So from an input perspective is that you do need to understand what are the key requirements for each or the key objectives for each department, and then look at those shared objectives, look at those shared requirements, and then build upon those. That is the key element to the success. And again, at a very high level, it could be almost like the 50,000 foot view, but then that that cascades down to, to the daily operation and how to fulfill that. And as we said, continuously improve.
So you're saying then that the strategic planning has to be done at the highest level, maybe at the headquarters of the organization, but then it has to go down to maybe the territory level, like if they're operating in different countries, and then go down to the department level.
Definitely.
So that's a very intensive and holistic approach to strategic planning. This
Yes.
definitely needs a lot of understanding of the whole organization, its culture, and it has to be two-way communication. So a top-down approach, but at the same time getting parameters from the various departments, the various jurisdictions where the company operates.
That's bang on, AJ. And then you do need that ongoing communication. You do need the ongoing, meetings. We've mentioned before about, failures within, startups and failures within organizations. But one of the biggest failures is because of lack of communication. And lack of communication within departments, lack of communication within the employee base, because you're only as strong as your the weakest employee. So you have to have that communication continuously.
So you previously mentioned that you have to look at your strengths and weaknesses. So that's basically a SWOT analysis.
That's right.
Could you just explain that for our viewers so that they understand that?
Sure. So there's every company has strengths, every company has weaknesses, and it's important to be able to understand that and be humble enough to accept what you are good at doing, what you're not good at doing, where you need support, which groups you need support from, whether they're internal or external. So that SWOT analysis is definitely critical when you're doing your objective planning, because part of the SWOT again is the threats that are out there, and those threats could be internal threats, they could be external threats, it could be environmental, it could be government, it could be a health pandemic, and with all this going on, that's why strategic planning needs to always keep that SWOT mentality, throughout the daily, monthly, annual, and then longer term planning too.
And that SWOT planning has to be done at the corporate level, or would it be done at a more granular level?
Well, it's everybody has to take responsibility, for the objectives. And even though at corporate level, they're going to be seeing the high level view, it's the frontline manager, for example, along with his employees, that are going to be executing, the operation. So from a regional, we mentioned top down, and bottom up, that can be as high level as head office, wherever the head office may be, to to the particular country, to the particular plant, to the particular department. But it could be a plant in a regional environment. Let's say it's an international, a multinational company that has operations in China, or has operations in Europe. That those local operations may be impacting head office, and how the strategic plan would have to change to accommodate the overall company operations too.
So that's where you're talking about a pest analysis here.
Yes, yeah.
So those factors, political, environment, social, and technological, those have to be taken into overall company analysis based on the various jurisdictions where the company is working. So for China, it would be totally different. For United States, it will be totally different. And let's say Mexico, it will be totally different. But from a overall corporate perspective, how would you take into account all these different pest analysis?
That's a very, very good question, and that really depends on the way that the company is run. However, it is keeping your finger like definitely on the button of the latest and greatest information that's out there. In the automotive world, throughout COVID, there was it was a staged shutdown, an international staged shutdown, and it was a staged startup as well. China, as we know, was impacted first, with COVID, and they took immediate measures, to shut down. They were anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks ahead of the curve from anywhere else that COVID hit. After the things were able to start up again in China, they were ahead of the curve from the rest of the world there, and they took proper measures to kick things off. So 8 weeks in advance, they were able to start things up, and then Europe started up, and then North America started up, Canada and the States. But again, with another threat that happened was that the coordination with Mexico and the Mexican government was not there. So Mexico actually ended up impacting the North American pipeline, the supply chain, because they could not supply enough parts that were required for the North American market. So that was another strategic move, an immediate strategic move that needed to be done very, very quickly to say, okay, how is each regional plant going to work with this particular situation? Cyber threats with certain companies where the entire company is shut down, that happened to a lot of the automotive suppliers. It also happened to OE manufacturers where they were literally shut down. So how can you strategically get yourself out of that situation in a very time-sensitive manner?
So it seems that strategic planning gurus like yourself, they have to have a lot of foresight because it has to be a 10-year plan or around that time span. But they also have to be very nimble in their
Yes.
thinking and make sure that the organization does not suffer from immediate external stimuli.
That's right, and it's how you react, to that. It's how quickly you can take action. It's how quickly you can get again your employees, involved and make those decisions. I know that there was a lot of the suppliers, automotive suppliers, that started, producing ventilators, started producing face shields, to support what was required, with this particular, the COVID pandemic that, that we're going through. So that again is showing agility. It's showing the, quickness to react, to, what's required.
When I was reading the articles you sent me before this session, one of the benefits which was mentioned and which piqued my interest was promotes motivation and innovation. And from IICIE, we are all about innovation. So how would that happen from, and you've worked in a very large enterprise, how would it, one, enable motivation and second, innovation?
By enabling your employees, by giving them the opportunity to improve their particular process, to improve others' process, that really that enabling creates an atmosphere where people are self-motivated and allowing them to innovate accordingly. So, in the past, there used to be, more emphasis on industrial engineers, for example. Throughout the course of time, however, and part and parcel of TPS, or the Toyota production system, we're seeing that by enabling the team member or the employee, that gives them the desire to do a lot better, to improve, and by giving that respect, that mutual trust, that's critical in any environment. Whether you're in retail, you're in manufacturing, any space, aerospace. It all goes back to that original strategic mindset that flows throughout the entire company.
Totally agreed with that. That has to be the culture of the company. That has to be ingrained into the culture of the company, and that mindset has to be there. And that's what great companies show us. Like Microsoft is a great example that how they totally innovated and came into the cloud space and just became a leader in the cloud space from the traditional desktop space. So innovation definitely is something critical. So we're almost at the end of our time. I do have one final question, and you know that IICA has these eight different themes: so leadership, growth, content, knowledge, innovation, a few others. Where do you see strategic planning sitting in these themes?
Strategic planning, no matter what we're talking about, has to be at the beginning. It has to be, it could be like a whiteboard with brainstorming initially. It could be on a piece of paper, a napkin. It could be, very informal initially. However, those ideas, those strategies are critical to the success of any company. So it has to be at the forethought of any leader of an organization.
So basically, leadership is the area which strategic planning is all about.
Yes, correct.
That's great. George, has been extremely great learning curve for me. I've learned so many exciting things in this conversation, and I thank you for giving us this